So we'll start with this. Let's also heal up. Oh, I did get Ice Rush. Beautiful. 41k normal attacks. We love to see it. I mean, after you've seen that, what else is there left to say? Other than, look at what C2 Xilonen hath wrought upon this world. The undeniable power of the Cryo Buff, front and center for all to see. Hello everyone, welcome back. Once again, at no point should you ever feel like you need to get this constellation. You do not. The release of Xilonen as well as Mavuika and the release of Iyansa as well gave us ample options for the redemption of Meltloy. And soon we're going to be seeing yet another character show up who is going to be a particularly interesting further improvement for French and Freezeloy as well. Now considering that I've already activated C2 Xilonen, today we're going to be doing a deep dive on the effects of having this constellation available for your own perusal. But first, don't forget to subscribe. We've done the vegetables part of this C2 Xilonen mini arc. Now it's time for the meat. We're getting into the things that I think were really exciting for a lot of people. The Cryo Buff, and then later on, the Electro Buff. So, ringing that bell does mean that you'll be notified of the latest and greatest videos on the channel. Now, let's remind ourselves of what C2 Xilonen's Cryo Buff actually is. 60% crit damage. Now you may find that this sounds a little bit familiar because it's the C6 Sara of Cryo Buffs. Electro mains love C6 Sara's buffs, but I think Cryo mains might find a little bit more appreciation for this kind of buff from C2 Xilonen because at the end of the day, Melt, for example, is generally a stronger reaction than Aggravate. Now previously I had mentioned a YouTuber by the name of Red Warrior who had made a correct observation that the Cryo Buff isn't actually that strong in the grand scheme of things for a lot of Cryo characters who tend to already be built with quite a lot of crit damage because they already have a lot of crit value in their kit in some meaningful way. For example, they're using artifact sets like Blizzard Strayer or Mother Chaussee in order to further enhance their crit rate, thus pursuing more crit damage substat rolls. There are, of course, a couple of counterpoints to this that I think are worth discussing because we essentially have plus 60% crit damage as a semi-permanent fixture for pretty much all of our Cryo characters. A couple of things actually tends to happen. So the first thing is that some of our more unused, like our typically non-meta artifact rolls, suddenly become significantly more powerful options. A prime example is my Oops All Crit Rolls attack hat, which has resulted in very close, if not outright slightly more damage coming than crit damage hats. I did some testing with Meltloy. Attack Cryo Attack is actually now my strongest build with C2 Xilonen. We're talking about plus 4k more damage on Aloy's nukes, which is not a huge amount considering that they're already doing upwards of like 240,000 damage. So it's not massive increases, but it's a noticeable one nonetheless. You can, of course, use an EM hat or, well, I mean an EM sand as opposed to an attack sand or attack hat, but it doesn't seem that useful, at least in Meltloy, because Sucrose is already there. At least for me, Sucrose is already there, so she's already got all of that handled in that regard. Meanwhile, we can also hyperfixate on crit rate all of a sudden, because sometimes, even if you're using Blizzard Strayer or Mother Chaussee, your substats might end up just being Oops or crit damage and attack. for example. And so you may find yourself with, let's say, 40% crit rate before the set bonus. So you don't necessarily have to use a crit damage hat anymore. With that plus 60% crit damage, you may want to consider using a crit rate hat. Yes, I know you're using a crit rate artifact set. You may even be using a crit rate weapon. But perhaps running a crit rate hat suddenly makes a lot more sense, even if you are ever so slightly, you know, overcapping crit rate. As long as you're not massively overcapping crit rate as a direct result of running that crit rate hat, it seems like that might be the way to go. And then finally, you can focus on getting more crit rate at the expense of crit damage if you happen to be building a different artifact set that I haven't already mentioned. For example, the build that I'm using right now is 2-piece Shimenawas and Blizzard Strayer. And so if you're using, let's say, the Burning set, because you're playing Burnloy, if you're using Shimenawa's Actual, for example, yeah, or if you're using the Skirk artifact set, which I haven't actually tried yet, or 2-piece Blizzard or Skirk, well, there's an idea. Either way, you can focus on getting more crit rate, because if you get more crit rate, you obviously have a much more consistent time with Aloy at the very least, and then you can, you know, offset the loss in crit damage by having C2 Xilonen, and then you have that extra crit damage running in your build. Suffice to say, as I mentioned, my Aloy build, my Meltloy build, is now a 2-piece Blizzard Shimenawas with attack, cryo attack. The hat is actually even from the artifact transmuter. That's how much I've decided to actually go all in on this, and I'm running the R5 Skyward Harp. Now I am using an attack hat over a crit rate hat because I end up overcapping crit rate if I decide to run a crit rate hat. In this team, I am also running C2 R1 Xilonen, C6 Sucrose, and R4 Wolves Mavuika. Yes, this is probably my personally most expensive team of all time, and I heckin' love it. I should also point out though, C6 Xilonen and having Aloy on a crit damage hat does seem to barely outperform this team as well by, again, around about 4,000 damage on an ult that already was doing about 245,000 damage beforehand. So that's like something I could keep in mind if for whatever reason I need Xilonen on the other side. But of course, what does Xilonen do that Xilonen doesn't do nearly as well? Healing. So there is obviously that kind of consideration to be made. I have also tried C2 Xilonen in a couple of other teams, so let me just run through them with a few thoughts. First off, Frenchloy, tried this out with the Last Abyss, seems like a perfectly solid constellation, did make the run feel a lot stronger, of course. One thing I actually didn't realize until very, very recently for some reason is that if I decide to go and get Escoffier to replace Xilonen, even though I have Kaz on the team, at the bare minimum, I should be able to continue playing Freeze and Frenchloy with 2 Cryo Characters, which is particularly good if I'm trying to run First Great Magic, because First Great Magic does have that passive, which is an increase in attack, so that's obviously going to be quite useful. And then, well, Escoffier does a fair bit of damage as well, so I guess the team DPS is going to be pretty high. And then on top of that, like I mentioned, Freezeloy, well, I mainly tried this against the Bishop Local Legend. It didn't seem to feel like I was doing more damage than just running Kaz. I don't know how that happened, because I'm not even taking into account like the Kaz Bomblet grouping consistency part of it, which does end up making Kaz the preferred pick over C2 Xilonen even. But I don't know, I just don't seem to be doing as much damage, so maybe I wouldn't recommend it for Freezeloy. That being said though, maybe I just don't like Freezeloy as much as I used to anymore. Maybe I'm just into the Meltloy meta right now. Meanwhile, Frostloy, which is a perfectly fine team with C2 Xilonen. It was nice to see both Aloy and Layla benefiting from the buff, but of course this is a team where I was struggling to get Ice Rush and maintain Ice Rush, so not a fan of it. Would probably still prefer to run Kaz, but hey, we don't exactly have a whole lot of options available in that regard. And then finally, of course, I tried her with Ayaka. I don't even know what's going on when I'm playing Ayaka. There's a lot of numbers on the screen whenever Sakura, Blossom, or Kamisato Art, Soumetsu just starts popping off. So I don't even know if it's actually working. And I especially don't really know what's going on when I pop Shenhe's skill. So let me know in the comments if you're watching any of the B-roll with Ayaka in it, what you feel about that. But either way, I'm going to be looking forward to seeing what kind of shenanigans I can pull off with C2 Xilonen and Skirk, because Skirk is allegedly a cryo character if the cryo artifact set is anything to go by. So we should be seeing plus 60% crit damage for her. It would be hilarious if Skirt ends up being a character who can't crit. Surely that's not the case, right? Between the exciting new build that I have on Aloy, and that by all counts shouldn't be that meta, but with C2 Xilonen it seems to be, and just the really nice increase in damage that I am now seeing with Aloy, I'm actually quite liking the cryo buff a lot. And so it's not my absolute most favorite buff from C2 Xilonen, unlike the higher majority of Jarls who voted in the poll about which one is your favorite of the buffs from C2 Xilonen, but I do like it a lot nonetheless. But now that I've given my thoughts on the cryo buff, I am of course going to be looking very forward to talking about what is very obviously my personal favorite of the buffs, which is going to be the electro buff. I've left the best to last. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below. How do you feel about the cryo buff, and who are you using it on? Maybe you're using it on Risley, maybe you're using it on Ayaka, maybe you're a based DPS Charlotte player. Holler if you are. Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, hope you guys enjoyed it. If you liked this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more Genshin Impact action, and until next time, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Destruction shall rise. Have a taste of courage. Hear the echoes of the valley. Time to go. Light of the breaking sun. Rising.